I was extremely lucky to be employed back to Perth College in 2011 to research women in leadership. And the model that I selected to underpin that was Perma. So if I'm 100% honest with you, I didn't actually know that I was launching with a positive education program at that time. So we were launching with a model to enhance the leadership identity of young women. So where did we start? We started with a Perma Audit. And I acknowledge that we were really lucky because this was a choice from our leadership team and our board. So I didn't have to go through that whole process of convincing them that this will be a good idea. So we started with a Perma Audit, got year 7s to 12 there, but it was actually kindergarten through to year 12. We looked at health and phys ed, beliefs and values and the pastoral care program, and we looked for links back to Perma. We also noticed how we could value add to one another. Like, got our departments working a little bit closer together because there was some content there that we were repeating and we could actually extend the students more. Since then, thinking skills has been added and we had some considerations. We wanted it to be sequential from kindergarten all the way through to year 12. Our wellbeing time in terms of actual days was very limited. So it was really important that we chose workshops that were skill-based and aligned with that Perma model. But we didn't also want to use all of our time because we wanted to leave enough space to be reactive to student needs. So in 2012, InsideOut was born and we went with that tagline, inner development, outer excellence, and Felicity is going to share where we went from then. So we'll tell of some of the hiccups we had along the way and how we've consolidated.
Thanks, Deb. So at first our aim in our student programs was to really get the girls to take responsibility for their own wellbeing. We really wanted them to understand themselves. We wanted to get them to understand their strengths, their role in teams, how to operate in social settings and so on. And we also were quite keen to use our personal best philosophy, which has been part of our pastoral care ethos for a very long time. So incorporating all of those things. So when we talk about being age appropriate and sequential, obviously what a year 7 needs is very different to what a year 12 needs. So we don't have time today to go into the detail of what we do, but Deb and I are very happy to talk to you about that afterwards over lunch or later in the day if that's what you'd like. But if I tap into year 7 just as an example, obviously there the transition's going to be on, the emphasis is going to be on transition. So we want the girls to, get to know the other girls, make sure that they can deal with all those complexities of having 140 odd girls in their year group. And some of these girls have come from country schools where they might be the only year 6, and then they're faced with all of those, those year 7s in front of them. So I'm just going to read you a quote after one of our InsideOut workshops. This was an amazing day and you really made me look at things differently. I learnt about study skills, positive thinking, dealing with conflict, and how important it is to be myself, which I think was probably the most important part of that quote. What we realised also is it's really important to bring the parents on board. So Susie's already mentioned that we've got 180 who are registered for our Monday night workshop with parents, and we found there's a huge appetite from our parents to know more and also for them to be considering wellbeing as a really important aspect of their own lives. So that's been quite interesting to watch as it's evolved. So again, a quote from a parent: I was so encouraged that Perth College cares about our daughters' emotional intelligence as well as intellectual aspects of development, and I look forward to further programs in the future. So in that first year in 2012, we think we did a really good job with our parents, with our students, with the students going home and selling the story to their families. But what we really missed was the staff component. So what we did the following year, particularly in 2013, we actually held a pastoral retreat. So we got all the pastoral staff together, and at that we actually shared the Perma Audit, because again what we realised, we were doing a lot of things behind the scene but we weren't really sharing the story enough. So we actually sat down as a team of pastoral care leaders, year coordinators, junior school actually stepped aside because they're doing quite different things in the junior school, and we looked at really where we're at. what happened in that first year, how successful were we, where did we need to go next? And what we did realise quite distinctly was that we had missed quite a significant step, and that we actually hadn't brought the staff on board. The brief really that we had at the beginning was to think of a student program, and particularly emphasising leadership. And then we realised that to get to leadership, you actually need to really work on wellbeing. And so we had to rejig things a little bit and really bring the staff on board. So to do that, what we realised after finding that stumbling block was that in a senior school setting, and I'm sure many of you have this problem, is that if you run a workshop in a day, and if I use the example of Year 7s again, what we did in that first year was that Period 1 teachers went to Period 1 and then they left. And then Period 2, of course, the Period 2 teachers would come and then they'd go. So they weren't getting the full benefit of the workshop either. And the pastoral staff, so the Year 7 form teachers, weren't there at all. So we did have a little bit of a battleground, because here, a very academic school, academic time is significant. But we did win, and now the form teachers are actually going to those workshops for the whole day with a year coordinator being with them. And what we realised also was that we needed to provide some resources. So we then had some material that led into those workshops and then led out. And when you say it out loud, when Deb and I were preparing this, it seems so obvious now, but it just wasn't at the time. So, just take stock as you go along and go, yeah, what's happened? Is this working? Talk to people and then change your practice as you go, because it does need to be movable. And the other thing that Deb mentioned also is you need to always build enough reactive. Again, in year groups, if you've got a particular group of Year 9s this year, the Year 9s next year will be different. So what you thought was working really well may not actually work for the next year group. So make sure you build in enough of that reactive response as well. So in 2014, our emphasis really has been around that concept of learn it and live it, and that's when we've started to bring the staff on board. So this year particularly, that's when we've been able to get really stuck into our staff training and our staff, really valuing our staff wellbeing. So part of it was to actually value our staff wellbeing and to teach them some skills that work for their own lives, and that naturally flows into their classrooms as well. And we're going to have a really good example of things that are happening in the classroom in a moment. So we started by, Susie Green came at the beginning of the year and started some work with our team of champions. And so we've got people from junior school, from administration, from senior school, and we actually tried to touch each department as well, so that when they were training, and they sort of volunteered, but we tapped them, didn't we, Deb, to make sure that we had enough across those different cross-sections of the school. And they've started to do some great work, but we're only just starting that training now. So Susie will actually do a whole staff PD on Monday to share that story with the whole staff, and I talk about whole staff being the admin as well. And then on Tuesday she'll work with our team of champions again, and then she's going to revisit us later in the year. So we've decided to spread it over a whole year rather than have it compacted. And then Deb's been running some team of champion workshops after school, so again we can share what's working well in classrooms and so on. But that's where I'm going to end, because part of our celebrating success is to actually showcase what some of our staff are doing, and the HAS department, or the Social Science department, will take over now.
So, as Felicity said, part of our initial journey was that there was actually a fair amount of staff disconnect, and as happy and positive as we are in the HAS department about new initiatives and developing our teaching and learning programs around more common school goals, we certainly did feel overwhelmed, and we were at the same time implementing a visible learning project. So I know lots of you be pretty familiar with visible learning as well, but basically it's based on John Hattie's meta-analyses, and it's really looking at what works and what is worth investing time in as a staff and in your classroom that's actually going to get effects for your students. And we liked the idea of visible learning because it's about the students. It's student-centred. It's letting them know the secret of where they need to go. So interestingly for all of us here today, you can see that some of the biggest effect sizes actually come from things that we would like to do as part of positive education. So positive student-teacher relationships have an effect size of 0.72. So under Hattie's research, you want something over 0.4 to actually be worthwhile and actually have a big impact on student learning. And the other big one that we have been focusing on in our department is feedback and assessment for learning. And we've actually been really looking at how we can balance the two projects. And what we've really realised is that visible learning is about students reaching their optimal best. No matter where they are on the spectrum, it's how that they can actually personalise their learning. And sorry to flip around, but if we go back to positive ed and what that actually is, you can see it's all about people flourishing, achieving their optimal best. So really we see the two actually go hand in hand. Sorry about that. In terms of feedback, we really wanted to focus on how we give feedback. And I know all of you here as educators go, yeah, of course, we do that every day. And we said the same. But what we started to think about is our language and how we can change the language of the feedback we give to actually fit more in line with all of the positive psychology messages that the girls are getting from all of these interventions, and how we can actually make that a daily business and really walk the talk, which is something we've talked about a lot today. We actually just made small changes. So when we gave written feedback, we actually separated into columns what went well, acknowledging the students' strengths, and then giving them a chance to say, these are some things to work on. And from that, the girls are actually starting to develop SMART goals and actually key into things. How can they use their strengths to actually develop the areas that they are passionate about? So some of you might have in front of you, and there's a few floating around, our reflection rubrics that we use from 7 to 12. So our Year 12s actually get the same rubric, and they actually love them in preparation for their exams. And the whole idea here is that the girls are acknowledging what they can do, what they are good at, and setting themselves their goals. So this is very personalised, it's up to them. On the flip side, you can see how we've sort of scaffolded that a little bit more for our lower school years and actually put in things like learning intentions and success criteria. But the whole idea here is that the girls are getting the sense that we are in a reflective feedback culture, and that in our classroom, we will use words like yet, which lots of you would have heard today, and developing this idea of the growth mindset. So I'm going to hand over to Louisa now, who's going to talk a little bit more about how we do that in our classroom.
Just go on. Okay. All right, can I just ask how many of you have heard of the concept of growth mindset? Have anyone? Okay, so that's good. I've only got about 5 minutes. So just quickly, it is a concept that was developed by psychologist Carol Dweck, and she's actually written this book, which I do recommend you read if you are interested in learning more about growth mindset. That's something I did at the beginning of the year because I was looking at using it in the classroom, so I read the book. You don't have to read the whole book because there are sections on education, on sport, on corporate world. You can use growth mindset in any area of your life. Okay, so basically she believes that there are two types of mindset. We have what's called a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Now, a really good thing for you to do as a teacher is actually think about whether you've got a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And, in some areas I think, well, maybe I have a bit of a fixed mindset, and in other areas I have a bit of a growth mindset. Now, your fixed mindset is where you believe that your traits or your behaviours, everything just basically is fixed. So you can't change it, you can't develop, and you don't want students in your class to have a fixed mindset, because they tend to be kids that'll say, I can't write essays, I'm not good at essays, or I'm dumb, or I'll never be an A student, or I'll always be a C student. So on the other hand, your growth mindset is where you believe that you can actually develop and change. So all your traits you can grow, but you also believe and understand that you have to work hard to do that. So you can get success, but it is through hard work, and with that comes resilience, which is something that we like to teach our students as well. Right, now, so what do we do? What did I do? Well, first of all, I had to learn the language, and I do have a poster in my classroom. I'm a senior school teacher, so this is a junior school, but luckily I can see lots of posters up here which really, talk about the same sorts of things, about not giving up. You can do things that are hard. That sort of thing is all about thinking and changing the way you think about yourself. and how you learn. Another good thing, and just going back to what Jess was saying, is the student reflection sheet. So, getting students to get their assessment and have a look at where they went wrong and see where they can improve. And I have a really good example, and I'll leave it with that because I don't have much time, but I have a really good example of a student that that actually didn't do very well in her very first assessment at the beginning of the year in history. She actually failed it. And if students have a fixed mindset, what they tend to do is they put their assessment away and they're like, well, I failed and I'll always fail and I can never do better. I could see she was really upset, so I took her aside and we went through the assessment, and I just said, look, this is where and how you failed, but you can actually pass your next assessment if we work on these things, or if you work on these things. And so someone with a growth mindset will take advice and understand that they can change and they can grow. So I worked really hard with her, and the next assessment, it was an essay, and we worked on lots of drafts and lots of feedback. And you just saw that, you could tell that once she did those extra drafts and worked really hard at improving, that she felt more confident. She went from a 45% in her first assessment to about a 67, I think it was, in her second assessment, and that was through hard work, perseverance. And just from that, her whole motivation just changed. She was, she didn't disengage anymore. So that's the thing with fixed mindset students, they disengage. And you've probably had students in your classroom that you can relate to that disengage. We want to try and change that. We want to have students that are motivated, that want to learn, but know how to. So it is about self-reflection and growth. So that's it. I'm going to pass on to Helen because she's going to talk about social capital. These all relate, by the way. So what we're doing with visible learning, what we're doing with growth mindset, social capital, they're all interlinked. Okay, thanks.
I'm aware of time as well, so I'll be really brief. As Louisa said, so we were implementing visible learning. Through that, we were trying to achieve a growth mindset better. Just have to be on camera, obviously. So I tried to implement this with my Year 10 class. So I was using the reflection sheets, I was using all the terminology, and I found with about 3 or 4 students, I was just hitting this roadblock. And they were stuck in this fixed mindset, and I'd be like, let's set some goals, let's review the goals, and I really wasn't getting much out of them. In 2013, we had a PD introducing us to the InsideOut program, and they spoke about this idea of social capital. He explained it to us very basically as, learning your students' names. And I'd be pretty embarrassed if I didn't know their names by term 3, so I had that down. But I realised I needed to know more about these girls, and I needed to have a stronger relationship, particularly with the ones that would be seen to be underachieving. Social capital is defined as networks of positive relationships between teachers and students. So if you have a stronger social capital, it means you've got a stronger relationship between these students. I really see it as a gateway to promoting growth mindset because, as I said, I found that I needed to strengthen this relationship in order to be able to just try and get them to understand the importance of this growth mindset. How did I do it? So last term I focused particularly on one girl in my Year 10 class because she was consistently getting 40-45% in assessments. What I did with that, it sounds easy, but I just talked to her more. So after class for the next few minutes, I'd have a few words with her. I found out she was really into anime. She sent me some YouTube videos. I actually watched the YouTube videos, so we had something to talk about. It was this common language, which isn't positive common language, it was anime common language, but it built a connection between us. The outcome of that was I became more approachable. So she was more comfortable coming to me with her revision guide, with her goals that she was setting, and we actually together then helped to develop her skills in geography. It increased her motivation, and she passed the next assessment. So that's why I found social capital to be important. Luke's now going to talk about a program which kind of links onto this.
Yeah, so we sort of got to this point and we thought about how can we bring all of these things that we've been working on and looking at, bringing them together. So we came up with this task called the PC Passion Project. Now, If you've been in an IB school, you probably know about personal projects. You might have heard about Genius Hour that Google runs. So Genius Hour from Google is this concept that if you give people 20% of their time to just do whatever they want, then they'll invest in things and they will be more happy because they're looking at things which they're passionate about. So at PC, we tried to sort of develop this idea of how can we use Genius Hour to then, reach some of these goals that we're talking about with visible learning, and obviously Positive Ed as well. So we run it for 1 hour per fortnight during our regular classes. We start off with our Year 7s, trialled it there, and then we've also started to integrate it into our Year 10 program as well in the House department. And the concept is that it allows students to actually explore their own passions and encourages creativity in the classroom. So it's not complete freedom. We do set some parameters. So for example, in Year 7, the first task had to be related to an ancient civilization, and then currently they're looking at geography, so it has to be geography related. But pretty much that's the parameters. There's nothing else. They can present it in whatever way they want, however they want, and on whatever topic they want as well. So initially it was quite radical for them, and they struggled with this concept of what do I actually want to learn about, because quite often students aren't used to that. They're not used to actually having to think about what do I want to learn about for the next 6, 7, 8 weeks. So when we actually looked at it through the lens of the Perma model, we noticed that it actually was ticking a lot of the boxes in terms of Perma. So in terms of engagement, if you actually give people the opportunity to look at things that they're interested in, then your engagement is going to obviously increase. So we found that the girls were massively in flow, and they were massively flourishing. So in their 1 hour periods, they were sitting for an hour and just working solidly on this assignment because they were interested in it and because they actually wanted to learn about it and they wanted to do it really, really well. Our presentations have ranged from game show style quizzes. I had a girl bake a cake in the shape of an Aztec temple. I had an interpretive dance. I had a fashion parade. So it also actually allows girls to identify their strengths and also use their talents to actually present this sort of information. So it's not you have to do an essay. It's pick something that you're passionate about, that you have a strength and you have a talent at doing, and then share it with us. And that was really powerful for the girls. In terms of relationships, the girls actually have to stand up in front of the class and present it to the class. So it actually gives people a really great opportunity, firstly, to share something that they're interested in. I had a girl in my Year 10 class who loves video games. Previously, in every other lesson, she never speaks in class. So she actually got up and spoke for probably about 20 minutes about the impact of Xbox on the Japanese economy when they were looking at economics in Year 10. And that was such a big moment for her because the class, she had a captive audience, they all listened, and they got just as much out of it as she did. And there's been a great growth in her because now she knows that, okay, the class now know what I'm interested in. And they sort of understand where she's coming from in terms of her engagement in class now as well. In terms of accomplishment, the task is actually not assessed. And the girls struggled with that a lot initially. We are an academic school, so a lot of the time they are focused on, what's the mark, what's the weighting. But once we took out the assessment aspect of it, they were actually more willing to take risks because they knew that it wasn't, going towards a formal mark. So they were willing to bake a cake. They were willing to get up and dance. They were willing to do things which were a bit different. And then as part of this, we built in this idea of growth mindset. So each time we've run the passion project task, the standard of the task has gotten better because the girls are seeing what others are capable of doing and they go, oh, well, I want to set the goal to be as good as that girl's one, or, I want to try to be better than that next time. And that's really, really powerful as well. We do provide the girls with feedback on their assessment in terms of using our feedback rubrics, but it's not like a mark. It's not 67% or anything like that. It's just about them actually engaging with something that they're interested in. These are some of the examples. So initially, this is from the first time we ran it. The girls did stick to the traditional poster PowerPoint model a little bit. You can see this girl here, she actually made an ancient Chinese gong with her grandfather over one weekend, and the gong actually flips up and all of her information is in the gong, and she was looking at ancient Chinese art forms. Here, we've got girls, we had a number of girls who made Viking boats out of pop sticks. Again, this was done outside of class. They went home over a weekend and spent the weekend with their parents, working on this assignment. So it actually brought the parents in a lot as well. We've got one of the girls in the fashion show who did Greek fashion. We've got a girl here who did Antony and Cleopatra from Egypt, and all of her information is actually written on the wall of the rooms in which different events took place, and then quite an impressive Viking ship as well there. So we really found it to be an assignment and a task that brought together all of the stuff that we've been looking at in terms of visible learning, growth mindset, social capital. It's a great way to learn about your students and what they're interested in when you actually look at, what they come up with. And I suppose when they're given the freedom to do it, they dream big. So with our Year 7s, we're looking at geographical issues at the moment. So I've got girls in Year 7 looking at shark cull, they're looking at Ebola, they're looking at something about how wolves affect rivers in America. So, they go really, really broad when they're given the freedom to do it. So I'm passing back to Deb, who's sort of going to wrap everything up.
I get extremely excited when I hear teams like this present because I can see it being embedded. And that's kind of... Inside Out is so dynamic for that reason, because as departments start to embed and it starts to grow, you need to read Perma Audit and your scope and sequence just keeps changing. So we don't have a scope and sequence as such, it just changes every single year as we adapt to the kids' needs. We actually have been measuring right from the very beginning. Initially we were only measuring with the Year 10s, we were looking at core confidence and leadership identity. In 2014 we utilised the Gallup poll for Year 5 through to Year 12, which gave us some very useful information, and we also utilised the Gallup poll this year as well with our Year 5s and 6s. But this year we also utilised this tool, Assessing Wellbeing in Education, which was quite a new tool and provided us with some great information. Now the reason we went with it is it was very personalised, so the kids actually got something back. And it tracked them over time. So this year we've actually measured at 2 points and we can see what happens. The other thing that it allows is it allows you to put free text questions in there. So we threw a question in like, when are you at your best? Because we've had a focus on character strengths this year and we wanted to see what the kids would give us back, whether it would still be I got an A in maths or whether they would start to reflect on information like that. So it's a really useful tool from that point of view. The other thing with that tool is you can measure parent wellbeing as well as staff wellbeing. So we measured our staff wellbeing for the first time this year, and that too gave us some very useful information. With the free text questions, and Felicity did this, we fed the feedback back to all of the kids, so as year cohorts, and they were able to express their concerns. So first time round we got some issues like no microwaves in the canteen, or what else did we get? Issues that Felicity could have...
7s don't have enough play space, so we're trying to work now on creating some play space in a very limited... You can see our campus, so where do you put playgrounds and so on, so we're thinking we'll just engage the Year 7s, so they're going to do a little project next term to work out what they can do with the limited land they've got and where they can play and what they want to play with.
And we found it extremely valuable. So they'll say they don't like their locker rooms, and if we're able to explain to them why the locker room is in that state at that point of time, we can't actually open the windows for an occupational health and safety reasons, then they're happy with it. And we're building those relationships. So if you want to know anything about this tool, please come and ask me. There are other schools in Western Australia that are utilising it as well that are here today, and I'm sure they would be happy to talk to you as well. Thanks so much for coming. Do you have any questions for us? No, we're right on 1 minute over.